There is no doubt that Assassin's Creed franchise is one of the most popular franchises in gaming, as proven with the sales numbers. Whether it's due to the fact you're able to explore all these incredible recreations of places in the world, or the fact you're able to live the fantasy of playing as an assassin, a blade in the crowd. Most of the time. But while I will say this franchise has been going down in its quality and care in recent years, I found appreciation for the older games. Yes, if you actually read the title and thumbnail, you know I'm talking about Assassin's Creed 2. But in all honesty, the first 4 games are really great to me. Its overarching narrative is handled really well, with characters and stories I'll never forget. While obviously Assassin's Creed is what started it all, 2 just greatly improves on the ideas of its predecessor. It's unique but also stays true to the Assassin's Creed's core ideas at the time. So for this video, I will not be trying to go over the lore and stuff like the bleeding effect or the Sub 16s, as there are plenty of people out there that are better than me at covering that kind of stuff. Or you could just, play the games. I'll just try to elaborate my points of the story the best I can so people that don't follow this franchise as much as I do understand. Which is most likely a lot of you, if I'm being honest. Now, without wasting any more of your time, let's take a look into Assassin's Creed 2. To begin with the story of Assassin's Creed 2, I'd say it's definitely very different from what we have with more current games. One of those differences being a more focus on modern day and its characters. One of the main things that I feel made Assassin's Creed so unique. We'll start where the first game left off, with Desmond looking with his eagle vision at the cryptic messages that was left by someone, and the game doesn't waste any time. It's like he never left.
Lucy, where have you been? Why did they...
Now.
You escape with Lucy from Sergo, and we get to play as an untrained Desmond Miles in the beginning part of the game. And I like this, and I'll explain why this works well later. Once you recruit the other members within your assassin cell, you're introduced to new characters, Sean and Rebecca, and you go into the animals. And this is one of the main things I like about Assassin's Creed 2. It's how to introduce the main protagonist, Ezio Auditore.
Insieme per la vittoria! Insieme! Silenzio, my friends! Silenzio! Grazie. Do you know what brings us here tonight? Honor. Viere de Pazzi slanders my family's name and forces his own miseries upon us. If we...
Enough of your nonsense, Grullo!
Buonasera, Viera. We were just talking about you. I'm surprised to see you here. I thought the Pazzi hired others to do their dirty work.
It's your family that cries for guards when there's trouble, Gottardo. Afraid to handle things yourself?
Your sister seemed quite satisfied with the handling I gave her earlier.
Uccidetelo!
As you can probably tell, he's an assassin. He is a boy, and you're currently taking part in a street fight. This introduction of Ezio works in the game's favor, this being the build-up to his family's death. The beginning part of the game has you do multiple missions for people in the Auditore family, showing them off and introducing them, and build the connection they have for Ezio. It's a short section of the game, but it was built up well enough to have a solid payoff at the end.
In the absence of any compelling evidence to the contrary, I am bound to pronounce you guilty. You and your collaborators are hereby sentenced to death.
You are the traitor, Roberto, and one of them. You may take our lives this day, but we will have yours in return, I swear! We will! Father!
The thing is, the story of Ezio Auditore can be depicted as a simple revenge story. Yeah, sure, but how it ends shows it doesn't necessarily end for Ezio with his story. It's just a chapter of it, really. And because of that, I couldn't judge the story of Ezio and Assassin's Creed 2 as a whole. That's truly the main focus here is Desmond, and it's not whatever it is that is happening to the world, and use the bleeding effect of the animus to gain the skills of Ezio's. The intention of the writers is clearly to tell Ezio's story throughout his games, allowing for him to grow and tell more stories for his characters. The structure of his writing is honestly one of the reasons why he's still considered to be one of the best characters in gaming. Back to the story. Assassin's Creed 2's story takes place over a span of 20 or so years of Ezio's life. You travel to different cities in the world as you progress through the story. You meet new characters, both specifically in the game and historical figures. I'm sure everyone knows you meet Leonardo da Vinci in this game, and the fact that he actually serves the plot in some ways and actually becomes a good friend of Ezio's as he progresses through the story is actually pretty cool, and I like that, and I wish more Assassin's Creed games would go for that kind of approach when introducing historical figures. But as we progress through Ezio's story, we get to see him from a young man to a very mature middle-aged man and fully embraces his father's work of being an assassin. And I'd like to mention that Roger Craig Smith's voice work is impressive, especially the fact that it changes once Ezio gets older. And like I said, his character will grow over time and will be shown over the course of 3 games. Really quickly though, I want to talk about the Templars. The Templars in this case of Ezio's story serve their purpose really well as an antagonistic force. The reason why I mention this simply is because I feel as it is necessary for this game and a lot of other games to have a reason for the player to follow and understand the motivations of the characters. If not, it ruins the engagement of the player. Most games I've talked about haven't done this really well. Within the database there are these videos about the main target to be assassinated directed by Sean, which allowed for me to invest myself in these people and actually builds up the idea that people are really threats that do not these sinister dudes that just talk but, show no action, I guess. Within the world, you see these symbols of sorts, and this leads into one of the things I like about the modern day. These cryptic messages that you can unlock, left by Subject 16, the person who left those cryptic markings on the wall. Within these messages, you can learn more about the Templars and how the Peace of Eden have made an impact in the history of the world. For example, it's confirmed that the Templars have orchestrated a lot of the major conflicts in history, including World War II, and backing up the fact that they're winning the battle against the Assassins, and how important these Pieces of Eden really are in the grand scheme of things in this overarching narrative. And all of this really has just blown my mind how crazy this narrative is. You have the story of Desmond Miles, and also following Ezio's story, and we have these people that came before it, and it's just done in a way that feels like it isn't forced upon you, and this benefits people who want to take the time, solve the puzzles, and look beyond the fact that there's more to the story to learn about. And it's presented in a way that wants you to invest your time into it. That feeling of investment in an Assassin's Creed story is something that other games in the franchise lack, I believe. And once you finish the game and the credits roll, you're in for a surprise. If you play the other Assassin's Creed games, you'll expect them to make you have to sit through half an hour of credits. I was about to go and eat dinner and let it sit, but no, I was pleasantly surprised with a cutscene which student also let the gameplay while the credits are rolling. You get to play as Desmond Miles in this part, and throughout the game's story you have these sections where Desmond gets to try out the skills he's gotten thanks to Animus' bleeding effect. And at the end of the game, you utilize the fighting skills you've inherited to fight the Abstergo agents at the end. It's a good example of the gameplay actually serving the story, and you can tell that Desmond has most definitely improved his skill set, and you get to play as that improved Desmond, and it's such a strong way to end it all off. What Assassin's Creed 2's open world has done isn't talked about enough. Like its predecessor, it has iconic landmarks with lively cities and great architecture that you can explore. And of course, like the last game, the ability to climb up pretty much every building within these locations. But with 2's locations, it has assassin contracts, collectibles, and a story to tell with true missions. This open world design laid out the foundation for a lot of open world games we know and love today. The ambitious task of making a game where you're free to explore entire cities with this much detail and care has been unheard of before, or at least wasn't as popular until Assassin's Creed 1. And 2 simply expanded upon it. Honestly, imagine what games would be like if the franchise didn't take off. With the success Assassin's Creed had, it clearly had an impact on how games are made. Just look at how many open world story games we have, and you can see the similarities it has taken from Assassin's Creed. But back to talking about 2 and its improvements upon 1. One of these improvements being these parkour highways. These were essentially used to get to high ground a lot faster due to how tall all the buildings are compared to 1. This allowing for a lot more freedom of what players can do when climbing up and down buildings, allowing for the game to have some variety within assassin contracts. Have missions where you utilize a lot of the gameplay elements like the ledge grab and wall objectives. There's improvements like social stuff, which unlike the first game, you can do it with crowds of people instead of just the priests that can be found throughout the map in 1. All these features I mentioned, plus these incredible areas we can explore combined, allows for Assassin's Creed 2's open world to still feel fresh and fun when exploring after 10 years later. Now, seeing how far Assassin's Creed has come in terms of its gameplay, I feel it wouldn't be fair if I didn't go into it. For one, the parkour system of Assassin's Creed 2 that everyone seems not to like is actually pretty good. Better than Unity, I'll say, which came out years later. To give a bit of a comparison for a bit of understanding, In the game's Unity or Syndicate, you'll have to simply press and hold RT to sprint, and it'll instantly put you on your max speed, and hold A to climb. In Origins and Odyssey, just move the left stick and with A to climb. And 2, to reach top speed, you have to hold both RT and A at the same time. What a lot of people don't get, including myself at times, is that you're not always supposed to hold both buttons down at the same time. When scaling down buildings from a certain distance, simply holding RT allows you to go directly down, instead of straight in the air, if you're just holding RT and A. Another neat trick being the wall jack, this allows you to simply go up and down buildings a lot faster. And it's slightly flashier too if you do it correctly. Both of the things I've gone over really add some depth to the system, and a lot of people don't seem to realize this. You have control of pretty much every jump, every ledge grab, you name it. That control is something that Unity, most especially Syndicate, lacks. They mainly focus on flashiness and actual player control. Instead, I have no control of the ledge grabs or any of the wall ejects, and of course Unity allows for more control compared to Syndicate, but like I said, I still feel restricted when playing it. Parkour for these games have clearly been lacking for a while, and was moved to the side for the more RPG elements Assassin's Creed has been trying to go for in recent years. Whether that is a good thing or not is up for debate. I've had a really mixed relationship with the franchise of Assassin's Creed. I used to like the idea of being able to explore and live within these parts of history, but looking into it more, it's a lot more deeper. The conflict between the Assassins and Templars, the overarching narrative of the Animus and the First Civilization. A lot of people think these things take away from the experience, and they're right to think so. Ever since 3, they've been shown to actually present these things in an intriguing way. This resulting in old fans not caring for the franchise, which leads to the RPG formula, which is also attracting new fans, but fans that doesn't seem to care about these unique elements of Assassin's Creed, as Ubisoft doesn't seem to care about it much either. I'll admit, I didn't really have this perception of Assassin's Creed last year, but playing Assassin's Creed 2 after being 1 and continuing on with the Ezio trilogy, it really set my thoughts on how I feel about this franchise. Because while I don't believe in every creative decision made, I still can look at the first 4 games and appreciate the story they were telling. The story that was progressing every game, it felt like it was being built up to something. It's very clear it was well put together. Everything up to Revelations felt planned, and it's shown to be the case by its ending. Assassin's Creed 2 is one of the many examples of what an Assassin's Creed game should strive for. Not just a good setting, not a hidden blade, but feeling like it's a story worth being told, and have a solid payoff for that story. Assassin's Creed 2 does this while also still being a great game with complex parkour, cool puzzles, and tombs to explore, and so much more. These things are what make Assassin's Creed 2 Assassin's Creed at its best.